I think the toughest thing is that the you know, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. The story was still evolving and still being refined and tidied up as we were trying to finish the game, because we get to the point where we have all of our story threads that we've created in Act One and branched out into Act Two, and now we have to bring them all together into neat, logical endings at the end. And then you add on to that the level of complexity that we have with the origin system that we use. So you have all of your companions with branching storylines of their own, but you could also be one of them as your player character and having to account for all of that and all the different relationships that they could be in, who's alive, who's dead, who romance to, who's angry at who, and then weaving those throughout the main storyline. So it was a giant branching, uh, beautiful thing that gave me a lot of sleepless nights. But trying to figure out how to come up with estimates of what that's actually going to be in hard numbers, so that I can then talk with the writing department to say, here's how many dialogues I think it's going to be, and here's how complex I think they might be.
What was something you learned that helped you succeed at that over your time at BG3, where like you started out and you didn't know this thing and by the end you did, and it was like that really helped me have less sleepless nights or get better estimates or have more of a positive impact?
Um, Honestly, I think it was the change of position, because when I started in writing, I'm trying to estimate it based on just how many dialogues is this likely to be, how many lines is that likely to be, and you know that kind of where it stopped. And then when I moved into the region producer position, that meant that I was dealing with a lot more departments, and it was actually being able to draw on the knowledge of the different leads who I was
Mm,
interacting with a lot more. It made my life so much easier, because I could go and I could grab Graham in the cinematics department and say, hey, here's some things I just want to run past you. Here's what I've identified as some potential, difficulties that might occur for downstream departments. Can we chat through what might be difficult for cinematics in your mind? And he was able to run me through and go, 50% of these are totally fine. The other 50%, maybe, 10 of them or something I'll be really worried about. The rest are, we'll manage. And, he'll help me put some estimates to that. So I think it was actually just, part of it was just getting over myself a little bit and just going, hey, I have no idea. Can you help me figure this stuff out so that next time I have a better idea?
so I'm going to try to reflect back to you then, where what I hear in that is one thing that helped was when your view broadened to see more of the entirety of the pipeline, and also as part of that you became much more comfortable with what you didn't know and just going in with what you didn't know and just asking, and simultaneously trusting that the other people are going to cover and help. If you're missing something, somebody else has got it, and they're gonna tell you, or they're gonna like see the thing where you're like, okay, here's the whatever dashboard, whatever it is, and they're gonna be like, hang on, I think that one's wrong. And that again, both those things take pressure off of you. It's like, oh, it's okay for me not to know, and if I slip up, there's other people that are happy to cover, just like I'm gonna cover for them if they slip up.
That's
Um,
it. It's not even just specifically with slip up. It's just that it's just catching the information that's there. Like
mm-hmm.
there's a huge number of data points throughout Baldur's Gate, and I
Yeah,
deal with one very specific area of it. That's not even thinking about all of the different stats and spells and abilities and things that go on in the background that make everything that's not a cinematic it's
you're
really
right.
really fun.
Yeah,
So like there's all of those details are things that we have to factor in the storytelling, and I can't keep all of that in my head. So we need our scripters and our systems guys to come in and say, hey, but what would happen if you threw a fireball at this person mid conversation while your multiplayer party is having is talking to them? Or if you're talking with, I don't know, the tieflings in the druid grove and saying, hey, we've saved you, but at the same time one of your party is blown up part of the grove. How should Zevlor react in that circumstance? Should he pivot to then be against you and say, hey, what are you doing? Or Should he continue the conversation like nothing's happened? You know, all of these things are things that we need to factor in.
Yeah.
They're not always the things I would think of, because I'm, strictly at the time, at least at the beginning, strictly thinking in kind of writing terms. So having someone who can come at you with that information and ask those questions is brilliant, and that's why it's really important to have that overlap.
Mm-hmm. So,
and not just with producers, but with departments in general.
I think it's a really interesting life lesson, is realizing that you can't have all the answers all the time, and getting really comfortable with saying, I don't know, I need to find out, I have to look into stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like sort of early on when I was pushed into sort of a leadership role, it's you assume you need to have the answers all the time. And it's really hard those first couple of times when you're like, I don't know the answer. But there's a level of comfort in that, of like knowing that you can say to the team, like, I don't know the answer, but the question is super important, so let me go and figure out how to find that for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really good, and it's a good life lesson to sort of get your head wrapped around.
Love it. Okay, yeah. So for you, what was the hardest thing?
Yeah, my answer is not as astute as his. It's the complexity of the kind of games that we make that it was the hardest part for me, especially when dealing with actors. So I'm dealing with an actor or two actors, and I get them to do a scene for me, and then I'm like, okay, great. Now you're a dwarf and she's a dragonborn, so we got to do it as close to what we just did, but again at different heights. And now we do it another time, but we have to keep that consistency of timing and consistency of like performance and still emotional impact. And it's that trickiness, but it's kind of what you signed up for at this point. Like I sometimes I dream of doing a single player, like corridor type game, and I'm sure there's problems. I'm sure those are very, very difficult, but they're just a different set of problems. But these games are very complicated with a lot of moving parts for a lot of different teams.
Yeah. So for you then, what was the learning that you would say you most took away from that in the 3 years you've been there?
It's really going to go to planning ahead of time and having a really solid approach for what the day is going to be. And that's working with a producer and working with the cinematic artists and the cinematic animators to get all the information I need from them, of like, what is the point of this shot? What are the moves that we need? What are the little, like, give me 3 or 4 major points that you need me to hit. And then tell me where the wiggle room is so that I can have the actors play and come up with cool ideas, and we can expand past that. But you give me the non-negotiables for this scene. Like, the character has to do this thing, then they have to do this thing, and then they have to do this thing. And then I have sort of free reign to work with the actor and try to do something creative within that. And having those answers and having that all scheduled out definitely makes the day go easier.
Part of game development is cutting stuff. I've never, ever, ever heard anybody tell me, yes, we shipped a game with everything we'd planned to ship on time, and it all just went out the door, no problem. There's always cutting stuff. How were you two related to that? And what did that process look like? Did you enjoy this episode? If you did and are looking for more conversations like this one, join the Building Better Games Discord community. It's for leaders and producers in game dev who are frustrated with solving the wrong problems and who want to share experiences and learn how to lead and build better games. Check out the show notes to join. I'll see you there.